Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome here from Brussels to our today's webinar on cybersecurity. Thanks very much to all of you for joining us. My name is Walburga Hemmetsberger. I'm the CEO of Solar Power Europe, and I'm happy to have you here today at the webinar. So why do we discuss cybersecurity today? It is very clear that we need a digitalization to succeed in the energy transition. And this is a no-brainer, I guess, for all of us. However, this comes with the risk of digital attacks. It's a little bit comparable with other technology shifts that we all have witnessed. We did, for example, not need a virus protection for typewriters, but we need it for our laptops. And for our energy system, it's a little bit the same. We need to look into how we are dealing with and mitigating risks. But first, maybe let's look at the opportunities that digitalization brings. A digitalized energy system means a much more efficient energy system. It comes with lower costs for the system, but also with a better deal for industries, consumers more generally. And here are some concrete examples. In the construction phase of a solar plant, for example, advanced analytics and machine learning lower construction and asset deployment costs. Another example is when a solar plant has been built and needs to be maintained, digital technologies enable better maintenance practices, and it is potentially then extending also the operational lifetime of PV power plants and also network components. And the third example, solar is very decentralized with thousands of solar plants everywhere. And in order to coordinate those and orchestrate those plants and combine it ideally also with other renewable technologies, with wind and with batteries, we need them to play in symphony with the grid. And to avoid congestions and balance electricity markets, we need data and we need digitalization. So all of that, a no-brainer. We need to digitalize in order to achieve our decarbonization goals and in order to make sure that the energy transition is becoming reality. Now, what it needs are digital devices for that, which are supporting the energy generation, like inverters. They are increasingly connected to both the internet and to the grid. And here is where we need to manage the risk. And there is, for example, risks which are attached to individuals and businesses of losing personal and commercial data. For energy companies, the risk of not being able to produce anymore if something hits. And obviously also the threat of politically motivated attack on the grid. Now, currently, the share of solar in the energy system is still relatively low. That will change quite quickly. So at the moment, the risk of impacting the grid remains very limited. And we also, by the way, don't know of any incidents yet. Also, there is a number of measures that are already taken, security measures. For example, we have, and we're very grateful for that, we have a world-leading cyber security legislation in Europe we can be very proud of. Some of it is already implemented. Other legislation will be implemented latest in 2027. Just to cite these different legislative acts: the Radio Equipment Directive, the GDPR, NES2, the Cyber Resilience Act, and the Network Code on Cybersecurity. So that's the first part, legislation that is already in place. And then project developers and manufacturers implement cybersecurity measures in their own interest. So there's a lot happening on that side already as well. And we must not forget that when we talk about decentralization and decentralized solar PV systems, this is a security layer in itself. It's not so easy, different to attack such a system, different software versions, firewalls, locations, and weather. So it's extremely complex and very difficult to cause sufficient instability. However, there is a risk that remains. There's a risk of insider attacks on the grid. What is an insider attack? Someone inside a manufacturer or a demand response actor that has direct control over devices, and that could cause harm. Again, There are many reasons why this is extremely unrealistic. Certainly, manufacturers do not want to lose trust and commit economic suicide. Also, this risk is only related to small-scale projects. You might ask yourself, why? Because for large-scale installations, the power plant operator will check commands, will check updates and configuration changes, which the operator gets from manufacturers or service providers. So they can mitigate such insider risks. So again, the likelihood of this risk to materialize is not very high. It would also potentially only concern a part of the solar fleet. So there's no reason to panic, but we must prepare for the future. At the moment, as I said, solar is still, a relatively small part of the energy system, but we're growing so fast that solar is on its way to deliver the majority of Europe's energy. We are forecasting that solar will be around about 30% of the electricity production in 2030 already, in all kinds of scenarios. So we must take our responsibility as a sector very seriously. And we cannot leave it to grid operators. They have their own cybersecurity issues to deal with. We need to go beyond the current cybersecurity framework and we are proposing to add a security layer between the commanding entity and the controlled devices. For that, obviously, we also need the help of regulators and policymakers. And this is why we've been working together with our members to gain more insights, first of all, but then also to propose a way forward. So what we would like to do in this webinar today is, first of all, share the insights that we have gathered with our members on that question of cybersecurity and the risks. And we also come with policy recommendations. We come with 9 recommendations on what needs to be done in order to mitigate the very low risk that we have identified, but still we need to make sure that even that risk is mitigated. In order to do so, we have some experts that we've gathered in the webinar. But first of all, I want to introduce to you the one who is running the show further on, which is my colleague Jan Ossenberg. He's Senior Policy Advisor at Solar Power Europe and the coordinator of our digitalization workstream. Happy to have you here, Jan, to present the findings and the recommendations. And Jan is here together with Uri Sado. He's Cybersecurity Program Manager at Solar Edge. And Uri, you're also our Vice Chair of the Digitalization Workstream. So happy to have you here as well. I will be handing over to you now, Jan. Thanks very much for running us through the agenda and taking over for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Walburga. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. In the next 50 minutes, we are going to first have a presentation of our position paper that we are publishing right now. Then we are going to have a panel discussion with several experts, which I'm going to introduce after our presentation, a Q&A session. So please, if you have questions that you would to the speakers of the session, write the questions in the chat or in the Q&A box, and we will make sure that we'll get back to you on these questions in the last bit of the session. And in the end, we will have closing remarks by our chair of the Digitalization Workstream, Mireia Villas-Bonas. So let's start with the presentation. Solar and other distributed energy resources are taking a major share in the EU electricity mix. This, of course, means that cybersecurity risks are going to change. The EU has a world-leading cybersecurity framework, but now we have to make sure that national implementation matches the characteristics of solar power plants. And for this, we have a position paper to outline several policy recommendations and make sure that that solar is future-proof from the implementation on. In the next 10 minutes, my colleague Uri and I are going to speak about how the how solar is becoming a major share in the EU's electricity mix. We are going to outline how cybersecurity risks do change. We are going to go through the existing EU regulatory framework and outline our recommendations. Now, we expect that from 2024, where we expect 64 gigawatt of new solar installations, these will increase by roughly 10% over the coming years, reaching almost 100 gigawatt annual installations by 2028. In that change, the rooftop split between rooftop and ground mounted is going to move from 1/3 to 2/3, closer to 50-50. And in this development, government policies really play a critical role in making sure that the energy system is ready to move from centralized to decentralized. By 2028, we expect total installations to threefold, so reaching 890 gigawatt by 2028. Solar has repeatedly outperformed the expectations that people have in the technologies. Grid operators and regulators have usually underestimated solar growth, and now we have to make sure that they get ready. Solar is becoming part of critical infrastructure that not only means flexibility enhancement, but also cybersecurity. And with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Uri. We are going to shift back and forth a bit through the presentation, so be prepared. Uri, over to you.
Thanks, Jan. Yes, we decided to do some ping pong to keep it live and interesting. Thanks for being here. I want to talk about the risk of cyber. So as Walburga said, we are moving from a centralized grid model to a decentralized energy production model, which is the future grid that we will all base on. And what is unique beyond that topology to this future grid is that the assets on it, specifically in the solar field, will be both born digital and connected. You can think about an EV charger that was born connected to the internet, so you can control it from your phone. Every watt that passes through it is measured and registered as data. And compare that to a gas station where there's an analog pump and really hardly any precise gathering of that data. We are moving to a world that is built bottom up in a way that is both digital and connected. And this, as Walburga said, offers an attack surface for cybersecurity use as well. One major insight that we had throughout the last 6 months of working alongside the industry representative in the work stream was that solar cybersecurity is made of 2 stories. It's hard to talk about both at once, and it could be confusing. The division that is often used by data companies is rooftop and ground mount, but that is a bit confusing. From a cybersecurity perspective, the 2 stories are of the distributed assets, home inverters, business inverters, and of the power plants. They're usually ground mounted, but not always. In agricultural settings, for example, they could be on a rooftop and others. The different challenges of each one of these categories are distinct. For example, a home inverter that could be 5 or 10 kilowatts, like we said, is digital connected, but it also introduces new stakeholders to the grid. So for example, European countries already today have mechanisms in place to allow for VPPs and demand response programs, but there is no consideration in those for cybersecurity. What do I mean? For example, my company, SolarEdge, we produce millions of inverters that are already installed in Europe, over 1 million. And we have communications with these devices in order to offer control for the users of the device. So this, in a way, makes us into a new grid stakeholder on the grid. And like us, there are many other aggregators, VPP program operators, demand response program operators, and others. This creates various types of risks that were not treated in the past. For example, the energy consumption of a home can have a lot to say about data privacy. If there's a meter involved, you can know the consumption of the home, and then you can know, for example, if the TV is turned on at 2 a.m. at night. This type of data is partially protected by GDPR, but we will talk soon about our recommendations. Such devices that are installed in homes and businesses can also fall victim to ransom attacks in order to create criminal motivation for hackers. And when these devices are aggregated, yes, one of them cannot do much, but when you take 1,000 homes, you can create severe disruptions to the grid. When you talk about the other story, so power plants, these systems are also digital, of course, but they are only semi-connected to the internet. This is because many fields, or usually fields, are behind a controlling system, an orchestration system, like a SCADA controller. There are already certain regulations and controls in place for such systems, but there are recurring complaints about cyber workforce shortage to meet the existing regulations, to develop the regulations, and to enforce them. The risks more inherent to power plants are ransomware attacks and grid disruptions. And like what Borge said, this is more for the smaller plants that are distributed and not for the very large plants that usually can meet the regulation. The power plants are more maturely regulated, I would say, because they are very similar. A solar field is very similar to a wind field in terms of the regulatory, the communication flows, the data flows. It's a one-way energy flow out and not bidirectional like a home. And whereas the DRs are more like EV chargers or smart heat pumps. And they usually fall under regulatory frameworks of IoT devices and smart devices, which don't take into account the electric factors, and we will talk about that in a moment. So we first think that accurate terminology is the precise basis of a precise regulatory action. Click.
So the EU is already having a quite comprehensive framework. We have the Radio Equipment Directive, which regulates product security for Wi-Fi connected devices. We have the GDPR, which outlines requirements to protect personal data, both from commercial misuse, but also from criminal misuse. We have NIS2 directive, which regulates corporate cybersecurity, has corporate cybersecurity requirements for business operations and the governance of a business. And it contains 10 mitigation measures that must be implemented, as well as reporting obligations. Now, NIS2 is implemented by 2024, this year, at the end of the year. For the future, we have agreed on the Cyber Resilience Act, which will be implemented by 2027, which outlines 4 products with digital elements, both software and hardware components. The requirements have risk assessment to align product design with cybersecurity requirements and to have vulnerability handling measures in place. And then there's the Network Code on Cybersecurity, which is going to be implemented over a period of time, which foresees risk assessments sector-specific to the electricity sector with impacts on cross-border electricity flows. And here, grid operators, but also all relevant entities that have significant control over the grid must undergo risk assessments and have mitigation requirements that must be met, which are currently under development. Now, we have identified some attention points which we are going to cover in the policy recommendations. So first, the GDPR does not cover business data. NIS2 is insufficient, as we see, on data handling and operations. We see, as Uri mentioned, we have sector-specific translation that is missing. Of course, it's a horizontal piece, and now we're looking for vertical requirements. And it's insufficient on insider attacks within the context of the electricity system. Now, the Cyber Resilience Act is great from scope. When it comes to compliance requirements, inverters are not in the category that we think they should be, and we need a dedicated standard for distributed energy resources to meet the requirements in the Cyber Resilience Act. When it comes to the Network Code on Cybersecurity, it covers cross-border electricity flows, but risk assessments are not yet covered for low voltage grids, which we see as a bottleneck.
So now we will give a few recommendations specifics for DER. And I will be quick for time constraints, but please feel free to mark questions and discuss those in the Q&A. So our first recommendation for DER cybersecurity is to take the current CRA and focus a set of recommendations for DRs. So there is already an annex called Annex 2 of the CRA, which treats things like digital wallets and password managers and things that are high risk. We strongly believe the DERs should be considered strong risk for their potential impact on the grid. And these are high power devices that are common on the grid and are internet connected, like we mentioned before. Let's move on to the next. The second recommendation is that the current standards for cybersecurity, and I'm specifically thinking about standards like ETSI 303-645 and equivalents, are basically designed to protect IoT devices like a home router, a baby monitor, or security camera, while not taking into account other electrical factors like impact on the grid. So for example, you could introduce issues like a delay, a randomized delay if a shutdown command is given. Similarly, monitoring of electric parameters like DC to AC ratio could be introduced. And overall, we believe the industry should gather and develop a standard that is fit for such high-stake equipment. As the CRA is going to be translated into a specific standard, we believe that CENELEC should rely and adopt a specific dedicated standard for DR cybersecurity, which, by the way, has been done in the United States based on UL 2941. Click. The third recommendation is to take specific focus and protection in the EU of data flows, and specifically any function that has to do with the command and control of DR fleets. So like I said, companies, VPPs, control large number of DRs to provide a rich user experience. This provides homeowners, for example, remote control through their phone on their solar system. But these communication channels can pose a risk to privacy, user equipment, and also to grid stability if they are not sufficiently protected or somehow negligently misused. We believe that the EU should start working to develop guidance on how to safeguard this data, and specifically look at the Australian example, which has gone a long way pioneering this. Click. We also believe that the EU should create a security layer, and we are intentionally using vague language because this requires thinking and work and adaptation to the EU specifics. But this basically means the DR fleet operators, such as the company I work for, can and must be able to provide firmware updates, for example, as is required by the Cyber Resilience Act, but also do things like change inverter grid codes if the device is, let's say, sold on second hand, or just sent a restart device if the user has issues and requires remote support. Those types of basic functions, if used by hackers, can severely impact grid stability if done in orchestration. We believe that the EU government and governments should regulate this ability to perform such actions en masse, and such benchmarks for solutions are available with the automotive industry, which is relying on VSOCs in the future, and can also be controlled by security operations centers, SOCs, or national certs. We provide in our report various mechanisms that could start a discussion on how this can be done in a way that does not hamper competition or free market innovation, while also providing sufficient security and reliability to the future DR-based grid. Click. Now, a few words about power plant operations. Click. Like we say, these are very similar to existing frameworks of, let's say, wind fields or small fossil plants. But like Walburga said, small plants of, let's say, 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt, which are now cost effective for entrepreneurs to build and developers to build, like many in your industry, those are harder to protect. So there is this middle layer, which is in higher risk, especially when, again, orchestrated. So what we recommend is to implement best practices and do a lot of thinking about the right thresholds, while always considering the orchestrated risk to the grid. And I know that there are pretty well understood buffers of what type of tolerance a grid can have. And this is another area that should be closely looked at. Click.
Thanks a lot for the attention. Now let me introduce the panelists. If you would start your videos to start the discussion. We have Monika Sigri, who's the head of Unit B4 in Energy Security and Safety from the European Commission. She has plenty of experience in different aspects of EU energy policy and has previously worked as a management consultant. We also have Herman Karstens from ELIA, the Belgian transmission grid operator, who's responsible for cybersecurity for ELIA. He has over 10 years of experience in digital management of energy assets and cybersecurity, and holds a doctorate in electrical engineering from University of Pretoria. We have Uri, who's the cybersecurity program director at SolarEdge and vice chair of our digitalization workstream. He has been a director of cybersecurity in the Israeli government and holds a master's in public administration from Princeton and Paris-Sorbonne. We also have Paulo Muniz, who is the CISO at EDP. He started his career as a system administrator at EDP Distribution and later jumped into security in 2008 and is currently in charge over information security and IT risk department at EDP. And lastly, we're going to have closing words from Mireia Villa-Trunas, who is the global CIO of EDP Renewables, developing the strategy of digitalizing EDP assets and processes. She's also chair of Solar Power Europe's digitalization workstream and has a long history in leading roles in IT-related fields, working with companies from various industries. So let's jump into the first round of questions. Monika, how does the European Commission assess the cybersecurity situation in Europe, in Europe's electricity system? And can you maybe outline how the existing framework already lays ground for secure operation of power plants?
Yes, thank you very much. To be honest, many things have already been said during these introductory presentations. But from our perspective, we can agree with many of the statements that have been made today. We are on a path towards energy transition, and this requires a lot of changes in the energy system. And what we see is a more complex energy system, with more linkages and interactions between the different energy subsectors, but also with more linkages with other sectors such as telecommunications or defense even. This energy transition and the Green Deal and REPowerEU objectives that we have set for ourselves also requires or goes into a direction of stronger electrification, obviously more renewable energy generation, as you said, more decentralized energy generation, less fossil fuels in the system. And though from a physical perspective, decentralized energy generation is actually safer, from a telecommunications and cyber perspective, as you were saying, it does raise several additional challenges when it comes to cybersecurity. So, but without doubt, when it comes to the energy system, it is a critical part of the overall economy, and those we can always consider critical infrastructures within Europe. So when we come to and this is where we can definitely agree with all the digitalization, the more connectivity, the surface of potential attacks is indeed increasing in Europe, but then this is why the way we see this to be approached is from a risk-based approach. We need to be able to identify what the risks are, and for that we need to understand also the technical characteristics of the system and the different installations, and these kind of seminars are quite useful to exchange information on that. So by understanding how these work, we are more easily able to identify what these risks are, and then potentially come up with measures that can address preparedness for any eventuality, and also managing the risks in case they actually materialize. So what do we have when it comes to European framework? There was already a mention of some of the pieces of legislation that we have in place. We have been focusing on strengthening the cyber preparedness of the energy system in the last couple of years. We do have horizontal legislation, as you were mentioning, the NIS2 directive, horizontal in a way that it doesn't focus specifically on energy. It does focus on several others, but when it comes to the energy system, it covers electricity, district heating and cooling, oil, gas, and even hydrogen types of installations. The Commission also adopted an implementing regulation concerning the EU cybersecurity certification scheme on common criteria this year. You also mentioned the network code on sector-specific rules for cybersecurity aspects of cross-border electricity flows. This builds on the existing horizontal legislation. You mentioned the implementation will start in the coming, has already started, and it will take a while in the coming years. What this brings in addition is that its scope is limited to the entities that have an impact on cross-border electricity flows. It does require a risk assessment indeed of these, and then comes up with a set of measures that that these entities need to apply. It also brings together the stakeholders from both the electricity side and the cybersecurity side. So this is also trying to address this linkage between the different sectors, and then it also provides more precise instructions and procedures when it comes to the different electricity mechanisms to prevent and react to electricity incidents. Another piece of legislation that is worth mentioning is more from the energy security perspective. There is an electricity risk preparedness regulation, and under this risk preparedness regulation, there is an obligation of assessing risks to electricity supply and electricity systems, and this also covers cybersecurity risks. So this is also already an aspect with which we can contribute to identifying the risks, and then member states need to also come up and identify different measures to address these risks. And finally, you also mentioned the Cyber Resilience Act, which focuses more on products and digital elements, and the coming years will be focusing on implementing all this legislation, and if and obviously, if there are gaps in legislation, we need to find in which area those need to be filled in. As I mentioned, the cross linkages between all the different policy areas is quite complex in a way, and we have to find the most efficient way of addressing those gaps. So, just as an introductory point, this is what I would have to add. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Monika. Uri, can you dive a little bit deeper into the risks to small-scale inverters, how you see it evolving, and especially what are the measures that you take as an OEM to protect your inverters?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think at this point of our history, we understand everything is hackable, and there is repeated examples of this, and specifically to the inverter or small system space. There are at least 15 examples from the last 5 years of researchers, volunteers, people who have reported vulnerabilities. There was a famous example in the Netherlands in 2022, which was a NGO, a researcher group that just started poking around with their inverter, and they found that they can remotely access 40,000 homes in the Netherlands, probably more abroad. They reported this to the government, and this was then investigated and reported in a parliament probe. A similar example happened in the United States, where there was a federal government warning about a specific inverter that was not fixed. And you hear these things all the time. Only 2 weeks ago, there was a hacker conference in Lisbon, where a researcher company called Anthropos reported 5 new brands with vulnerabilities, where they tried reaching out to the brands and get a response. These were low-cost brands, and they got no response except for one. So we see these examples all the time. Technically, it's not even a question. This is possible. Whether it's happening also by non-white hackers, by actual hackers, probably. In other industries, we know that whenever there's enough attention by the ethical hacker industry, that also means things are happening in the dark. So these things are happening. I think the biggest risks will divide into two. If you're a homeowner or business owner, you can have personal damage, you can have your device destroyed, bricked, or a ransom attack. We did not see reports yet of a ransom attack in the inverter industry, but we've seen it with laptops, phones, and other stuff. So it's very likely this would happen. These attacks could be politically motivated or criminally motivated. But I think the more disturbing risk in this forum of talking about the EU regulatory framework is really what can be done if, let's say, 10,000 of these homes are taken into control. And this can either happen through hacking of the company that has connection with them, or through just collecting a lot of these unsecure devices, be it things like insecure passwords or default passwords or things like that. We do a lot in order to protect our devices and our backend infrastructures through our control servers. And I have to say, it's really not rocket science. The reason we are all, as consumers, very safe flying an airplane that has an autopilot, or relatively comfortable driving a car that has automatic braking and things like that, is because these mechanisms have been invented in other industries, not just military grade, but an iPhone and an Android phone have very sophisticated, but now standardized features, secure boot chips, unique passwords, multi-factor authentication. These are things we all experience when we access our bank account, but still today, the inverter industry is just completely not in that space of treating itself like critical infrastructure. It still is de facto as hackable as a baby monitor or a Roomba cleaner or a machine washer, dishwasher that is connected to the internet. So I can give a long and boring technical list of what we do, but it's not rocket science and it's not a significant investment. We have made that into a priority of ours as a company because we think cybersecurity is non-negotiable, just like fire safety. And I think this is starting to permeate across the industry, and regulatory action is necessary as well.
But Uri, you're right if you say but the Cyber Resilience Act does cover these elements, right?
The Cyber Resilience Act is really groundbreaking in setting IoT device cybersecurity. So there are very comprehensive requirements on an IoT device, but it does not address two very important issues. One is that it treats an inverter like any device, not a critical device. So for example, any manufacturer can just self-attest and they will hardly ever be audited. If you are a company of wallets, digital wallets, every year you have an audit and you have to do a certification every year. We believe that this should be the level of compliance required from digital DRs. And the second aspect is that the centralized control is not addressed. So if I or any one of the peer companies that operate fleets of DRs, inverters, batteries, EV chargers, if any one of these countries, somebody either, I'm not even saying insider threat, but there's, let's say, a technician that is negligent and they send the wrong command to 1,000 inverters. That could, well, not 1,000, but 100,000 could easily topple the grid in Germany. And this can create a domino effect because of the interconnections between countries. And just last week or 2 weeks, Bloomberg reported that a computer glitch in Germany spiked energy prices by 3,000%, causing steel plants to shut down. So these things happen by mistake, not even by malice or by a third-party man-in-the-middle type attack of somebody hijacking an insecure mechanism. But we don't think that the CRA at present is addressing those issues, and it should.
Right, but we also, I mean, you also have the NIS2 directive, which is addressing quite a lot on the corporate governance, including responsibilities, financial responsibilities for the companies that are involved. beyond of course the trust loss that they have in their own self-interest, which is addressing many of these concerns, which is why we of course position our recommendations, see them as being implemented within the national implementation of these measures. So the EU really has a leading cybersecurity framework that is on the way. But let's move on to Paolo. So we spoke a lot about the distribution between small scale and large scale. Can you give us a little bit of an update on ground-mounted or large-scale PV plants, possibly also with your experience from other industries, so the wind industry, on how you see the protection there, and what is the challenge for you as a company there?
Ian, thank you, and good morning to everybody. So a lot of things has been said, and exactly I will try to add our experience, because we have experience in the wind energy field and also in the solar in the different also domains in the distributed solar and also in the large PV. And I will highlight, because all the technical things has been already said, I will highlight two main things in concern of time that for us is more in the governance field, but is challenging. So the first one is that we don't see in the solar industry or even in the integrators, system integrators, the same concerns and maturity about cybersecurity. So all these vendors and manufacturers from trackers to inverters, they don't have this kind of concerns of requirements for cybersecurity. And the second thing that I want to highlight is the difference that we have in the type of the projects. The wind projects are more the turnkey projects, where your manufacturer is responsible for the project delivery, the warranty period, and the operation for several years. And in the solar, we get more a complex puzzle of stakeholders with the minimum responsibility during service and operation stage. That leads to our team's more challenging thing about cybersecurity, because we have to talk with the different, like a fragmented ecosystem, that none of them have the same concerns and the same maturity as we see in the wind energy. So it's just to mention these two things, because about the technical things already have all been said. So I would like to address these two things.
Thank you very much, Paolo. Herman, moving to you. So what is it from the perspective of a grid operator? You're of course responsible for managing the grid. You also have your own requirements outside of the Cyber Resilience Act. You have both in EU legislation, but also in the national legislations. What are the requirements for grid operators? How do you see the risk, and how does it compare to other risks, such as from natural disasters, that are comparable from the perspective of a grid operator?
Hello, everyone. So firstly, we've made great progress over the last few years with the legislation, and we have to commend our colleagues at the Commission for the work that was done there. And we, as a grid operator, encourage it. For example, the NCCS, the Network Code for Cybersecurity, our association, NCOE, was pushing for it to be implemented faster rather than slower, because we want the grid to be secure, and the legislation is necessary, but its existence by itself is not sufficient to ensure safety. We need, so in the context of our discussion today, we need manufacturers and industry to also look at these problems proactively. It's kind of a shared responsibility, and for ourselves, we don't just want our systems to simply comply to legislation and tick the box. We want to ensure that our systems are safe, because as a TSO, we have a responsibility towards society to ensure security of supply. So that's kind of the angle from which we come. On the Cyber Resilience Act, we agree with Solar Power Europe's assessment of that. It's a horizontal legislation, and we also need the vertical in energy, and it's kind of, at the moment, the vagueness is not helping, because it's creating it's lowering trust, it's creating some uncertainty towards manufacturers, and so for us to enable the flexibility from our side to help that these devices participate fully in the energy system of the future, we need that that kind of certainty. So we support this webinar and this initiative. In terms of threats compared to other threats, so we do have our risk assessments, and we take cybersecurity seriously. The thing that is a challenge for us at the moment is that on our own systems, our own IT and OT systems, we have a fairly good idea of what's going on there, and it's never 100% safe. We're always working on it, but we understand our risks. When it comes to these distributed energy resources, we have less of a view of what those risks are, and so to place it in the list of risks, we are looking for more information, and that's why we are doing this project at the moment. We are going to test these devices and do a threat assessment to be able to categorize that. I hope that answers your question. The main thing is that we see this as kind of a shared responsibility, and we want to collaborate with industry to address it.
Yes, and I mean, you reached out to us, and we already created connections to the vendors so that you can work together. Before we go to the Q&A session, I'd like to ask Monica another question, which is, what does the EU foresee for the future to ensure cybersecurity? Are there any initiatives planned? What is your plan?
Thank you. Well, I would say two main things. So as I mentioned already, implementation is in focus. So whatever we have already, first we need to implement that, and under that, it's not only the full transposition of the NIS directive, but also to implement the network codes. And so the process should start as we speak. When it comes to two other initiatives on which we are already working. They are not focused on solar, however, I mean, they are with regards to wind power, and I think there can be lessons learned from that process, and we could actually assess whether that is also an exercise that we could do when it comes to solar. So one of them is the risk assessments under the European Wind Power Action Plan. So there is an initiative to work on risk assessments, identify the set of risks, and do these risk assessments, and under that identify cybersecurity risks relevant to wind energy installations and related infrastructure, and that includes data protection aspects in view of assessing whether these could be exploited to damage economic security and the security of electricity supply. So this is one of the areas, and that could be replicated for the solar sector. And the other one that I would like to mention is the net zero under the Net Zero Industry Act. We have started work on an implementing act, which refers to criteria for auctions for renewable energy sources, and some pre-qualification and non-price criteria need to be identified. And one of these non-price criteria are indeed includes cybersecurity. So in order to make sure that cybersecurity is practically built into the systems before actually those are built up, so that the risks are addressed before we actually put together the different pieces and build up a power plant. So this is also very important. So this is more about the implementation and the current work. And when it comes to the future, we cannot commit the future commission on what they would like to do. However, recognizing the increasing importance of critical energy infrastructure and cyber aspects, we are planning, or we would like to see whether the current energy security framework is sufficient or whether it needs adaptation, and listening to all the elements and the gaps that you've been mentioning, we can see and we could assess whether those elements could be built into a potentially revised future energy security framework, identifying those which are specific to energy, and the horizontal legislation do not cover those. So this is what I could add when it comes to the potential future plans. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for the outlook on your next steps, and also on the ideas to work on some vertical requirements for the energy industry. So let's take 5 minutes to go through to some questions that have been raised in the Q&A session. First one is related to the Radio Equipment Directive, saying will be mandatory from August 2025. Uri, I know that you've been working on the RED. What is the standard that is going to be necessary to comply with the Radio Equipment Directive?
So we've been working on early compliance with RED. It's very close to ETSI 33645. If you comply with this, you will most surely comply with that. It talks about the product, so not like NIS2 about the company. And the challenge there is like we said, it's really an IoT standard. It refers to anything with radioelectric, with Wi-Fi. So there's two problems with it. One, it does not cover anything that does not have Wi-Fi. So you can have an inverter with a physical cable, it does not cover it. And number two, like we said, it's like for any IoT. It doesn't recognize these specific electric properties. The implementation of RAD is probably going to be swallowed into the CRA when Senelec, it's the same working groups that are working, adjacent working groups. So this is a very good step, leading in the world. Nothing like this in America or in the United Kingdom or Australia. But like we said, there's things to build on top.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Uri. I have another question for Paulo, which is, we've heard before that workforce constraints are something that energy companies, not only utilities, but also grid operators for cybersecurity have an issue with finding the right people. How is that in EDP? Is that something that you observe?
For sure, that's definitely a challenge. So in the last years, we saw a lot of rotation of people, especially the ones that are work on cybersecurity. But let me just try to also give you two ideas. First of all, is that for sure that we need to bet more in the young people and reskilling. So we are doing this internally. So we are starting to doing this internally and training the people and accept that one day they will fly away, because it's very difficult, very challenging for us to compete with other companies more in the digital area to maintain these talents. And the second thing is in the OT, particularly in the OT areas, so the areas that we are addressing here in this panel, most of people, some of the people, they accumulate more than one role. So they do system administration or administrate some other technical issues, and also they do cybersecurity, and they are not so they are more attached to the company in another way. So maintain these old people, or these people that are more ancient, more attached to the house, and contract youngers and reskilling internally is the strategy that we have, because we cannot handle anymore a senior team specialized in cybersecurity subjects as we did in the past. It's becoming terrible, very challenging, I would say.
Right, thanks a lot. Then two questions again for Monica, which is first one, would you see there's a willingness to develop a delegated act to move inverters to a higher risk category under the Cyber Resilience Act? And then have you looked into learning from traditional power plants, which also have cybersecurity elements, and what do you think you can learn from there?
Thanks for the questions on the CRA. I can't comment. That is not my area of work. So this is another policy area. So there, I'm not sure I'm the best person to respond. However, to the question on why not learning more from traditional sectors. We are learning from traditional sectors. So the work that we are doing under the Wind Power Action Plan is coming up with risk assessments and how to do risk assessments when it comes to cyber on that specific sector. This knowledge is based on the experience that we have in terms of developing risk assessments for oil, gas, and electricity in general. However, in the wind sector being renewable and understanding the higher level of digitalization, those are additional lessons learned that we can use then when it comes to doing similar activities in solar power. So we are using all the experience that we have in all the other sectors. And then I said on the CRA, I have to pass.
Thank you very much, Monica. Now, for the closing words, I would hand the word over to Mireia, who will close as the chair of our workstream.
Thank you very much, Jan, and good morning, everyone. First of all, let me start by thanking our distinguished speakers today, and starting by Walburga, probably you can put your camera on now. Paulo, Herman, Yuri, Jan, Monica, thanks a lot for your valuable and insightful contributions. I think it has been an exceptional webinar. Also, not only about today's webinar, but also about all the work and effort that has been pulled together in the position paper that we are releasing today. Also reflecting on the discussion that we have seen during the last hour, I would say what is clear is that we are in front of a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift where our energy system is becoming more decentralized than ever. And in that sense, as any transformative shift, we need to understand very well what are the opportunities, but also the challenges that will bring. And today we tackle one of the main challenges that we have ahead of us, which is cybersecurity, that in the new context, it becomes more relevant and more critical than ever before. In that context, we have seen all the different measures that the European Union is currently implementing, and our position paper is also here to emphasize the fact that this is not only a technical challenges that we need to face, but this is also a collective effort that we need to perform across the industry. And as such, this also requires coordinated actions across all the different stakeholders. The steps that we take today to secure our renewable energy future will determine as well our ability to harness the full potential of solar power, sustainability, and safety. I would like to finalize by also thanking everyone that joined us today in this webinar. Hope that you enjoy as much as we did with the preparations and with the delivery of it. And we wish that we keep this crucial conversation going, that we continue to collaborate, to innovate, to act in order to protect our solar infrastructure energy system. We are convinced that together we are building a much more sustainable, digital, and resilient future. Thank you very much, and wishing you all a great continuation of your day.